Thurgood Marshall was a renowned civil rights activist and the legal counsel for the NAACP who fought against racial injustices in the courtroom, and he ended segregation in schools as a result of his victory in the landmark 1954 court case Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. Thurgood Marshall was born in Baltimore on July 2, 1908, to a club steward and a teacher. He had a brother who was older than him, and they had a late great-grandfather who had been enslaved. He once said, "Now you want to know how I got involved in law? I don't know. The nearest I can get is that my dad, my brother, and I had the most violent arguments you ever heard about anything. I guess we argued 5 out of 7 nights at the dinner table." This was true. His father enjoyed visiting the courthouse and listening to cases, and every night, the three of them would share their impassioned opinions regarding the goings-on in the local court. Thurgood attended Colored High and Training School, where he had to memorize the entire Constitution as a punishment, which would actually benefit him later in his life throughout his career. He attended Lincoln University and was a very intelligent student who earned many academic honors. He was denied a postgraduate education at University of Maryland Law School because of his race, so instead he enrolled at Howard University. It was at Howard that Marshall met Charles Hamilton Houston, his legal mentor and the man who conceptualized the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Thurgood got a job working part-time as legal counsel for the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, in 1934. 2 years later, he began working for them as their chief legal counsel. He encouraged them to only take on cases that fought segregation as a whole. He founded the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in 1940, which was the NAACP's legal branch. Thurgood fought against racial injustices in the courtroom, such as segregation, inequality in the education and criminal fields of law, voting rights, and racial pay gaps. Each case he won helped someone who was being discriminated against and made the world a better place, bit by bit. Thurgood argued 32 cases before the Supreme Court and won 29 of them. The first case he argued before them was Chambers v. Florida in 1940, in which he defended 4 African American men who had been forced by the police to confess to a murder. He won the case. In 1944, Thurgood won Smith v. Allwright, where he argued a case against all-white primary elections. Now Thurgood, he faced constant danger wherever he went. He would travel around the country arguing cases, and he would have to run away from angry white mobs who wanted to kill him. Thurgood argued many cases in his career, though the most famous is Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. The case was a class action lawsuit filed in 1951 by the NAACP on behalf of an African American family whose daughter, Linda Brown, was not able to go to a school in Topeka because she was African American. Thurgood lost the case in the U.S. District Court of Kansas, but the case, along with 4 other similar cases, was allowed to go through to the Supreme Court, all of them being grouped under the name Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. They were heard in 1953. 1896's Plessy v. Ferguson was another famous case in which the Supreme Court ruled that segregated schools were constitutional as long as they were equal. This ruling was known far and wide as separate but equal. Thurgood challenged that. Throughout his career, the Constitution was Thurgood's biggest weapon. Before the Supreme Court, Thurgood argued that separate but equal was unconstitutional. And on May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court announced that they were ruling in favor of Thurgood and the families involved in Brown v. Board. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place, and that the families were being deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. He also stated that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The Brown v. Board decision ended segregation in schools, though it took a while for the decision to actually be enforced fully and correctly. Thurgood was appointed the judge of the U.S. Second Circuit Court of Appeals by John F. Kennedy in 1961, and he was appointed the U.S. Solicitor General in 1965 by Lyndon B. Johnson. On October 2, 1967, he was appointed as a justice to the Supreme Court. He was the first African American to hold this position. He served on the Supreme Court for 24 years. He retired in 1991 and passed away on January 24, 1993 at the age of 84. He was honored by the Supreme Court with the words, "Equal justice under law," engraved on the Supreme Court building. Thurgood Marshall made an immeasurable impact on the world and achieved many milestones in the fight for equality. The world would be very different today if not for Thurgood Marshall and his bravery to stand up to a broken system.